Most businesses today want to be more user focused as a way of building trust with their clients and staff. They are looking for innovative ways to do this. And any business that values its relationship with its customers, staff, and stakeholders must make use of conscious contracts. The process can be applied to leases, employment contracts, premarital agreements, co-housing associations, vendors, constructions, web terms of service, general TS and CS, coaching service agreements, virtually any contract you can imagine. A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Law Essentials India welcomes you to the fifth episode of Lawyers as Peacemakers series. Law Essentials is a student-run initiative by a group of inquisitive law students having a phenomenal idea about the application of law in day-to-day life. Today we have with us Ms. J. Kim Wright, who will be explaining us more on conscious contracts. I'm delighted to share that Ms. J. Kim Wright has written books on the subject of law and contracting and has been developing some of the core concepts in conscious contracts over the last 15 years. Wright has been a lawyer since 1989. Early in her career, she realized that the legal system was seriously flawed. It was focused on polarizing parties rather than bringing them together. Since the 1990s, she has been advocating for new models of law practice that are more value and purpose based, focus on creative approaches, and create win-win-win results. The author of several books, contributor to many others, she has trained in many countries and on 6 continents of the world. Conscious Contracts is her most popular training. Let us move to the much awaited event. Thank you so much for joining me here with us, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're all have all had a very okay-ish week. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through a little bit of a presentation here, and then I hope you'll have some questions. Can we see you?
Perfectly, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So conscious contracts is actually, it's a framework and a process. And it's a different paradigm than what most people are used to in the traditional sense. And so I want to talk a little bit when I start here about paradigm shifts. Now, have any of you seen this first strange creature? I'll ask those of you who are here with me to identify this creature. Well, it's kind of hard on the video. It looks like it might be a duck or a rabbit. Have you seen that one before? Farhan, ladies?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen this this creature that looks like either a duck or a rabbit?
Ma'am, that's the watermark of StreamYard, ma'am.
It says that it's sharing a window.
Yeah.
I'm not sharing?
It is shown, ma'am. I'm not sure which angle it is. Exactly.
You broke up. What? I didn't hear what you said. You broke up.
Hello, ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
So, ma'am, I was saying that I can see an elephant in one of the box. You're asking something like...
Do you see something that looks like a duck?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am, that's the watermark of StreamYard.
Ma'am, I think you haven't changed the slide.
On my screen, I have. I'm going to stop sharing and return and try again. Let's see here.
I think you'll have to make it a full screen, ma'am.
I did. I have full screen. Can you not see it?
It has not been shared yet, ma'am.
Let me try again. it now?
Yes, ma'am, perfectly.
And when I go to the slideshow, you can see that, the full screen. And can you see now what looks like a rabbit or a bunny rabbit, or a bunny rabbit or a duck?
I can
That
see
is
an
visible.
element over there, a flower. I think it's a leaf.
It's not
Yeah,
showing the
now I can
slide.
see the duck.
Yeah, ma'am. Now it's visible.
Okay,
There's a
so
frog.
I can't go to full screen, so I'll just do it this way. So you see something that looks like a rabbit or a duck?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
You notice that sometimes it looks like a rabbit and sometimes it looks like a duck? If you look at it one way, you think, oh, well, that's a duck. And the other way, it's, oh, that's a rabbit.
yes,
So
Yes,
the way you look at it makes a difference. And there may be, the first time you saw the slide, you may have said, oh, that's a duck. And you may always see the duck first, or you may now see the rabbit first. And that's the way paradigm shifts work. Your brain has to shift the viewpoint. Now, how about the woman? Can you see the old woman, or do you see the young woman?
I can see the older one.
You see the old woman? Can you see the young woman?
No, ma'am.
What if I tell you that the nose of the old woman is the chin of the young woman, and the young woman is looking away?
Yes, ma'am, I can see it now.
Can you help the others see it?
No, ma'am, I cannot see.
Farhan, will you help the others see it? Will you give them instructions?
I think that's the chin part. The nose is the chin part of the younger woman. The nose which you can see of the older woman is the chin part of the young woman, whom I'm just trying to point
Now I
out.
can see. Yeah. Now we can see.
Okay. Now you notice that sometimes in a paradigm shift, you have to get help to see both opinions or both viewpoints. So sometimes it's easy, like with the duck and the bunny. Sometimes it's a little harder, and then sometimes it's really you really need instructions. So look at the one that when I first see it, I see a frog. You see the frog?
also a horse.
You see a horse. You're really
I
good.
can see from-
You can see both. Can you all see both?
Yes,
You might need to help listeners who are looking at this and won't be able to sleep at night because they don't know. How do you see the horse?
if I tilt my head towards my right, then I can see a horse.
Oh, that's a really good instruction. Tilt your head to the right, not just tilt your head. So then you can see a horse's head with the mane in the water, and the eyes of the frog are the nostrils of the horse. Yeah, it seems like a silly little game, but it actually helps to train your brain to think of being able to see two things at once. And with conscious contracts, sometimes we need to see the old system and the new system at the same time. And so it's just a little practice for you. Now, during my lifetime, and not so much during yours since you're so young, we had a huge paradigm shift in society when the internet came along. And in fact, during your life, the Internet of Things has had a similar shift. It used to be when I was learning computer programming that the entire building was the computer. And now I'm surrounded by computers. My friend in Qatar actually posted on Facebook, she said that when she was at her office, she remembered that she might have left her clothes iron on, and she was able to go on her smart app and check to see if her clothes iron was left on. And not that many years ago, that would have just been impossible. Everybody, their house burned or they had to go home to check. So there's been like a lot of technological innovation, a lot of things that have started shifting our paradigm. Many of them we don't even realize how much they've shifted. I was telling a story about something that happened in 1986 the other day, and I found myself thinking that I had found someone on the internet. Now, the internet didn't exist in 1986, but it's so part of my brain that the way my brain made sense of a story in the past was that it put it in that framework, and so a lot of changes happen that just change the way we see things and the way we think, and conscious contracts I think is going to be one of those. Oops. Now, I love technology. I'm an early adopter. I have just ordered an iPhone so I can have Clubhouse, which is the newest, coolest thing, in case you haven't heard of it. I only heard of it a little while ago. It's a new, not really social media, but a chat kind of app. And I have a Samsung as well because I want things there. And I learned to program computers in the 1970s. Yeah, I love technology. I'm a big fan of technology. But what I'm really interested in, the most exciting breakthroughs, is, as this quote says, it's what it means to be human. How do we get along? We have billions of people here on the planet that have many different viewpoints, and we have to learn to get along with each other. Otherwise, all the technology in the world isn't going to make a difference because we're just going to destroy each other. And so that's my passion. It's really the human interaction piece. You probably have heard for years people have been saying that we live in a VUCA world, and VUCA is for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's VUCA everywhere, in business and psychology and education, journalism. There are all of these new things happening that are coming at us fast. Some technology, some in other kinds of paradigms. We're dealing with a pandemic, political instability in many places in the world, climate change, which is threatening us all. And out of that kind of crisis often comes creativity. And so for the last probably 40 years, law has really been changing quickly to catch up with that. And that's the integrative law movement, which I've talked about here before. Here are some of the things that have happened, some of the movements in integrative law around the world. Some of these are present in India, and when we have monthly calls and there's someone in India doing this, we always invite them. And some of them are not. And conscious contract is one of the models that I can't find in India yet. And so one of the reasons I'm having this conversation is that I hope that someone will want to adopt it and we'll be able to bring the model into India as well. So there are many names for what I call conscious contracts. Conscious contracts is actually a trademark that's licensed in the United States. But in some languages and in some cultures, other words work better, or some people just like other words. So they might be collaborative, integrative, values-based, mindful, purposeful, visionary, or relational contracts. By any name, there's a certain process that we go through. Conscious contracts didn't just spring from nothing. It actually was inspired and informed by many things: restorative justice and restorative circles, plain language, accessibility, lots of different models that we have brought together and taken a little piece from each. The history of this movement is, we always stand on the shoulders of many. But Linda Alvarez, who is now a good friend of mine, and I were separately doing this work. We were both inspired by Stuart Levine, who wrote the Book of Agreement and Getting to Resolution. And I was inspired by some friends of mine who have who at that point the company was called the State of Grace document, and then it became the Blueprint of We, who were organizational development consultants. And then I also studied appreciative inquiry, and which is another OD approach. And so as we were looking at all of these influences on us, we started doing our contracts in a different way. And then in 2010, we met and we started sharing our notes and actually developing conscious contracts together. Now, I do know that this is something that's in India because I've met people at conscious capitalism conferences. I think Tata, if I say it right, is a company that is very active in conscious capitalism. And there's a book called Firms of Endearment quite a few years ago that Raj Sisodia did research on companies that came from a different perspective, which are now called conscious companies. And the conscious companies have a purpose that is not about making money. So the purpose might be to make society better, or to end cancer, or something that is not about we're going to make millions of dollars this year. They also have a broad view of who are their stakeholders. So so the stakeholders aren't just the people who work inside the hotel. They're the people who provide services on the street for people who are guests of the hotel, for example. They attempt to have conscious leadership. I say attempt, some of them don't do as well, but they attempt to be conscious leaders and to actually bring a conscious culture to the business. So the conscious capitalism, which has those qualities, actually ends up making more money. It's kind of one of those interesting things in these days and times, but partly because we actually know more about companies. But when we have that good feeling about a company and they're actually doing good in the world, we're more loyal. Employees want to work for them. Investors want to invest in them. When they get media attention, it's positive media attention. People say nice things about them on social media. We like their brands and we recognize their brands. And so one of the things that when I started studying this, I thought, so being a good, purposeful company, doing good in the world is the right thing to do. And you make more money. It seems to me that you have a fiduciary duty if you're going to fulfill your charter to actually be a conscious company. That idea hasn't quite caught on, but I think there's actually a logical argument for that. There are certified B corporations around the world. I actually looked up last night, and India had a B corporation that was certified, and then it seems to have disappeared. But B corporations actually have in their charter that they are in business for a purpose, to make the world a better place. This is an example, Patagonia. And then there are 3,762 companies that are certified B companies in 150 industries, 74 countries, and they balance purpose and profit. And some of the better known logos are there. So that's one body of research and an investigation that led to conscious contracts. Another one is this book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux. And Reinventing Organizations took a completely different look, and they came up with that what makes a difference in a modern company is that they know and share their organizational purpose. So there's that purpose again. That their employees are allowed to bring their whole selves to work. So they are not compartmentalized into only being little cogs in the machine, but rather their creativity and their emotional, intuitive, and spiritual selves are welcome in the office place. And then they're also self-managed. And self-management has to do with letting go of the decision-making power from the hierarchy and letting employees have power to make the decisions about the things that they know the most about. There are a few self-organizing rules. There are things like holacracy and sociocracy, and then other they call them teal kinds of approaches, so that the businesses are flatter, less hierarchy, more of a series of teams, and then there's like an executive, an administrative branch that supports the rest of the organization rather than the traditional hierarchies. And so this book actually gives many examples of companies that around the world that have taken on this new model. So it's similar to firms of endearment in that way, but they pretty much had no interaction. They're just both noticing the same trend. So out of that trend, we also started seeing the integrative law movement. So there's also this whole movement towards legal creativity and design. And in our last call, we had some of the folks who are doing comic contracts who came on and talked with us. Like, instead of having a lot of words, why don't we make things easy for the user and use infographics and so forth? The language of plain language is the language of conscious contracts, so that instead of the party of the first part and we're for whatsoever, blah, 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 we actually write in very plain, easy to read language that users can understand. Now, almost everywhere there's a legal principle of freedom to contract. So far, I haven't found any place that doesn't have a freedom to contract, as long as the contract is not unconscionable or illegal or something like that, that people are able to enter into a contract that says pretty much anything they agree to. Most of us think about contracts as a document, like it's a piece of paper. But the way I see contracts is more as a process that leads to a document. So there's a lot of conversation that gets captured before it gets written down. You don't just write down a term sheet and hand it to a lawyer in the conscious contracts model. And then, so what makes it a conscious contract? We're going to look at each one of these a little bit, but there's a mindset that shifted, that paradigm shift that we talked about, which is starting to look at things from a different perspective. There's a touchstone, which is about values. We'll talk about that. We call it the ACED. We'll talk about what that is. And then the other elements include negotiating based on your values and needs, and then drafting in a way that's creative, relational, and user-friendly. So we're going to look at the mindset for a moment. So the mindset, it shapes the entire process. Going from a growth mindset where you think that you can actually learn from conflict, that it can help you grow, that failure is actually a lesson, that things are possible rather than things are impossible, versus the fixed mindset that most of us are trained in law school to have, which is that there's a black and a white, and it's either good or it's bad. And if it's hard, you're supposed to give up, those sorts of things. So the shift in mindset is really important. And then when you have that shift in mindset, you use different language, and you put the content is different, the design of the contract is different. Even the setting where you have the contract, like, that you have the negotiations, can be different. Instead of a sort of a cold boardroom, maybe you have your meeting in a garden where people can relax and have tea or something like that. And now that many of us are locked down around the world, sometimes it's just a shift in attitude about how you are on Zoom. But the mindset is the starting point of actually shifting shifting that paradigm. And it's about trust. So contracts are relationships. They're not just like relationships. They are relationships. And communication and a foundation of trust are key. Companies tend to write longer contracts when they don't trust each other. So if they trust each other, the contract is 10 pages long. And if they don't trust each other, it's 87 pages long. So they're trying to put all of their contingencies in the contract because they don't trust how it's going to turn out, and they're not very transparent with each other. But in the case of the conscious contract, that's not the case. We actually build a foundation of trust and transparency in the beginning so that we have trust and we don't have to write down every little thing. We can create a process for decision making rather than make all those decisions in advance. So traditional contracts are generally written by lawyers for lawyers, and they're written as a weapon to use in court. And they don't tell you anything about how do you avoid conflict or what do you do if a small conflict comes up. Like most contracts are completely silent about that. Helena Hapio, a Finnish contracts expert, talks about it in terms of a user-uncentered contract, whereas conscious contracts are user-centered. For lawyers, it's an opportunity to be multidimensional, to bring any tools you have, anything that you've learned in your life. You can bring that to the table, and you can even bring other people who bring expertise and do it in a collaborative sense. And the contract is written for the actual users in the language they use, and the relational language, and then they are involved in actually creating it. So they don't have to get into the trap of, well, I didn't read the contract. They more than read the contract. They created the contract, and the lawyer's job is just to put it together and make sure that it actually complies with the legal principles. But they talk about that too. So the contract belongs to the parties. It's not the lawyer's contract. It's not the court's contract. It's actually writing down what their expectations and obligations are of each other as part of a relationship. It's designed to empower the relationship, and then to get something done together. It's kind of it's like a safe place of, okay, we agreed these are the details. We're going to write them all down. We trust each other, and now we're going to go do it. So I mentioned earlier that one of the core components is the touchstone. And the touchstone is actually that first conversation where people get together and either they're explaining it to the lawyer because they already know, or they think they know who the other person is. But the question I would ask is, like, who are you? What's important to you? Why did you choose this project and these people to undertake whatever this journey is? A lot of companies have a mission, vision, and values or principles or something like that they put on their wall. Well, the touchstone actually puts those into action. Like part of who you are is that mission, vision, values, and your principles. And we build those into the contract. This is a problem for some companies that actually don't live by their values if they don't have that kind of integrity, and they end up changing the values on the wall because they realize that they're that what they say and what they do are different. So we use a lot of tools for identifying those purpose and values. In this case, these are some cards where you can actually pick out your values. There are actually 92 of them, but I didn't put 92 slides. And you can pick out the thing that calls to you, and then you can talk about it and talk about, well, I chose this card because courage is really important to me, and I see this elephant is being courageous and doing something that the little elephant doesn't look like it. It's a very safe thing, and so, or you could say, well, I like the elephant, but the courage word didn't appeal to me, but the image says this about me. I see the light streaming on the elephant, and I think that I'm always being watched. Whatever you see, you see the image and you see the word, and you tell a story that allows you to be better known. One of the reasons we do this is that people getting into contracts often have a lot of ideas that they think they know, and it turns out that they're in different paradigms, or they're not even on the same page at all. And the touchstone actually tests the relationship to see if it's sustainable and to see where those pitfalls are. Many times I've had clients that at this stage, they said, she's not who I thought she was at all. And I don't think this is going to work. And that's actually good news, because you haven't yet entered the contract. And you can say, well, I actually think that we've had two different ideas, and I really want to pursue mine, and I wish you luck, and let's still be friends. And so that's the that's part of why we do the touchstone. The touchstone also reminds people why they do this. Like I had one contract. There were these two guys, kind of tough guys, didn't talk about feelings or anything like that. But when I asked them why they got together, they just were so excited. One of them talked about how visionary the other one was, and then that guy talked about the quality of the work, and they were both so proud of their relationship when they had that conversation, and they'd never said it out loud. And so then the guy who was all about quality was able to really focus on quality, and the guy who's the visionary could focus on vision, and they knew that those were the pieces that they were responsible for. Now, the ACD, I mentioned, we call it that because it's kind of long. It's the clause that is about addressing change and engaging disagreement. Now, some people would call it the conflict resolution provision, but it's not a typical conflict resolution provision. It's just, we just drop in and say, well, you have to mediate or something like that. This one is actually designed by the parties. Once they have those conversations about what they are and why they're coming together, there's actually a lot of really good feeling in the room, and they they want this relationship to succeed. And human beings get angry, things happen, things change, and so how do we align with our touchstone and create a way that we're going to solve problems? So this little problem-solving wheel, it looks like it's for children, and it actually is for kindergarten. But it actually gives us a lot of wisdom about things that we can do when conflict happens. So I ask my clients, what do you usually do when you're in a conflict? Some people say, well, I run away. Some people say, I blow up, and I yell, and then I feel bad later. And so they can talk about what's a healthy way to resolve the conflicts that come up. So maybe walk away and let it go for a little while is one of the strategies. And they actually design a strategy that they understand. It's like, I'm going to tell you what works for me, and then you're going to tell me what works for you. And then we're going to agree to do that. And we're going to write it into the contract as the first step. So I have a lot of first steps, and I do a lot of this work in Spain. And in Spain, the first step is always, we're going to go to lunch together. That's a cultural piece, that going to lunch together is an opportunity to restore the relationship. People choose a lot of different things. It's like, first we're going to have a conversation. And so each component is built sort of like, you start with this for the easy stuff, and this is for the hard stuff. And then you may say that you will bring in a mediator, or maybe there's someone you trust that is an advisor that you both trust that will come in and help you resolve your conflict. And all of these steps then become a precondition to filing any lawsuit. So before you can go to court, you actually have to sit down and have a conversation. or have someone help you have a conversation. And the rules are there. The strategy, the framework, you have designed it. It has not been imposed on you. Then there are many creative ways to negotiate. This colorful thing that looks like a game board actually is. We created a game board for startups to have these conversations, and we walk them through the questions. And their goal is to go through every step and get to the middle. And we ask them to draw pictures and tell stories along the way. So that's one of the games in progress. There's something called systemic constellation, which uses the little dolls. And if you don't know about that, it's like an amazing thing that has people are starting to use a lot in conscious contracts. There's a process called the 6 thinking hats. There's many processes for negotiating that are not that hard-nosed, I'm going to get my way kind of negotiation. And that's what we bring in. It's actually interest-based rather than position-based, which if you haven't had mediation training, I recommend the book Getting to Yes. It's like, how do we take care of everybody instead of just fighting? And conscious contracts are flexible. They're living documents. They're not meant to be thrown in a drawer and then just pulled out and used as weapons. They actually are, well, gosh, something has changed. Let's sit down and see what we need to do with the contract. And the people are actually empowered to do this. It's they don't always have to go back to the lawyers and have the lawyers, go through some kind of process. Once they've gone through the process, they've actually created their own system. There are lots of other stakeholders that are involved that we consider. Sometimes we invite experts to the table, and somebody who knows more about. Maybe we have a tax or finance question, and we have someone come in and help us with that. And then you see this at the bottom. This is actually a conscious contracts workshop and session where there's a lawyer, a CEO of a company, and a client of that same company working together to create a model contract that they can use with all clients in the future. And actually, conscious contracts are fun. I know that it's hard for you to believe, but most people, they go through the process and they say, wow, I haven't had that much fun doing a contract ever. And so that's like it's energizing rather than draining, as most contracts tend to be, the traditional ones. So when at the end we put it in writing, we actually write down our touchstone, we put it in the contract, we say how we're going to address change and engage disagreement, how we're going to communicate, are we going to have meetings to check in with each other, that sort of thing. Then we talk about the typical deal points, like what we're going to give to each other, how much it's going to cost. And then we talk about how we're going to record the document and what language we're going to use. So the language is relational, it's appropriate to the users. I did a mortgage between my mother and her grandson recently, and he calls her nanny, and so the contract actually called her nanny, and it said at the beginning, it said, these are the parties with their full names, and then my mother is called Nanny, and the person getting the mortgage is called Justin, and I had a real estate expert look at the contract, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it. They actually wanted to find something wrong with it. It was kind of funny, but they couldn't find anything that was wrong with it. But it was much easier for both of them to look, and they each have, these are Nanny's obligations and these are Justin's obligations. So they were able to understand things in a way that the mortgage forms don't allow. Now, contracts also are often look like this thing on the before side. It's just fine print, and that's all in Dutch, but it doesn't matter because you've seen that contract. You might have unfortunately had to sign a contract that looked like that before. Whereas the conscious contract is it looks like more like a marketing document. They're just color and headlines and bullet points and all of this. This is an example of Suzanne, her surname is now Vandermeer, created this for a Dutch energy company. And they were so proud of it, they actually ran it as a full-page ad in the newspaper. And as we talked about in our last session, that there are comic contracts where the words are really limited. They go from thousands of words down to just a series of drawings, really proving that a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So who uses these contracts, how and why? Here's an example of a client of mine who is so eager. He's often interviewed about these. He said it was a life-changing event for him, that it forced him to think deeper and how to handle emotions and how to seek a mutually beneficial relationship designed for success. In Basque Country, they have in Spain. They generally train with about 90 people or so, and so a lot of people have done this work, and they use it for leases and estate planning. They adapted it to for people creating wills and succession planning in businesses, for premarital agreements. So there are a lot of experiments going on. In the Netherlands, if any of you have read the Reinventing Organizations book, Buurtzorg is a company. They're actually now in 25 countries. I think they are in India. They have tens of thousands of employees, the highest satisfaction rate of any healthcare organization named Best Employer. They've documented savings of 40% to the Dutch health system, all in a self-management, holistic, nurse-led model. And so Joost de Blok actually has started using the conscious contracts and with the government. And the woman is Digna de Bruin, and Digna has been working with Buurtzorg. And now I got an email from her that the government has hired her to help streamline their contracts. So that's a huge development. In Australia, the Association of Corporate Counsel has offered this training several times. And I mentioned this work that I did with the Western Australia Individualized Services, bringing CEOs and clients together to create a model contract. So these are some of the other uses. That pretty much any contract where the relationship is important. I don't think my credit card company is going to adopt this model anytime soon. They don't care about me. They don't care. They don't care about much of anything other than I pay my bill. And so they don't, my well-being is not a concern for them. But where the relationship is important, especially where the relationships are going to continue over time, or they're going to repeat, you're going to have several different projects with the same person, that's a really good place to use these. So there's a lot of books and materials about this. These are some of mine. Enlivening Edge magazine and Conscious Company magazine are online. And you can find a lot of articles about this and some of the other ideas. Those are my 2 books, and I also write quite a bit for the American Bar Association. I mentioned the Blueprint of We earlier, some friends of mine who inspired me. They have also the Center for Collaborative Awareness. And so they are business consultants who actually go into companies and do this kind of work for creating teams, but they're not legal contracts. But a lot of their work is relevant to us. The book Discovering Agreement by Linda Alvarez is really the book that really captures all of this. The subtitle is Contracts That Turn Conflict into Creativity. And then I mentioned Stuart Levine, who inspired both me and Linda, the Book of Agreement and Getting to Resolution. Here are some more links. If you want some more information, consciouscontracts.com is a really good place. Reinventingcontracts.com. My websites are jkimwright.com, cuttingedgelaw.com, and then we have a Facebook page, Cutting Edge Law, where you can, it's not, I don't post 40 times a day or anything. It might be once or twice a day, sometimes once or twice a week, that you can go and you can get news about this whole movement. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hope that there may be some questions.
If anyone else has,
Yeah, ma'am, I have a question for you. Ma'am, since these conscious contracts are made by the individuals themselves and they can modify the same at any point of time. So what if one person modifies the contract at a later point of time? So what is the remedy available for the other person?
Yeah, one person can't modify it. They have to agree to modify it. But circumstances change. And especially, like, for example, a startup may have a contract when they begin, but when they get their first infusion of capital, a lot of things will change. And so that's an opportunity to sit down and say, what is changing that we're going to need to reflect in the contract? And so the contract is not meant to last for their whole lifetime. It's meant to help them along the way. So one person can't modify it alone. They have to do it together. And the people do it with the help of a lawyer in the beginning. But once they create their system for how we're going to make changes, they can choose to go back to the lawyer, but they don't have to. They can say that when to use our example, when we get our first investors, we're going to sit back down and we're going to say, we're going to revisit everything to see if what's still relevant and what needs to be changed. And so they can either do that with their lawyer or together. Because the relationship is so strong at that point and they're so transparent, they're often able to do it by themselves.
Ma'am, I have a question. Since in this shift to conscious contracts, parties are free and allowed to make their own terms and conditions, like drafting their own contracts, will this not shift from traditional contracts to conscious contracts, reduce the job opportunities for lawyers who basically earn from making these traditional contracts?
Actually, no, because the traditional boilerplate is something that AI can do. You don't need human beings for that anymore. And conscious contracts require a conversation that is moderated by the attorney. And so and the attorney is the one who actually does the writing, but the terms are generated by the people because they know what they need and they know what agreements they need to have in place.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. My question is, what is the main difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset with respect to conscious contract?
The when business people go to a lawyer, they often say that the lawyer kills the creativity. And so if they go in with a lot of good ideas, and the lawyer says, "Well, you can't do that, and you can't do that. You can't do that," from a fixed mindset.
That is the fixed mindset, no?
That's
That
the
is the
fixed
fixed
mindset.
mindset.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if they go in and they say, "This is what I want to do," and you say, "Wow, that's really great, but I see some problems with this. Let's see how you can do it and
That is
still not run into those problems." So it's a yes, and we have these parameters that you have to be considering, rather than a no, you can't do that, go away.
all right, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering.
Sure.
Ma'am, one more question.
Yes.
Yeah. Ma'am, so you said that an employer and an employee can also have this conscious contracts. So what if the employee violates can the employer be still liable for the acts of employee? Like the vicarious liability, will it still prevail?
So, so I think you're talking about two things. There's the contract, and then there's whatever the law is about liability. But the contract between the employer and the employee, I'll give you an example. This is actually one of the ways that we started using this in employment contracts. Is that my friend's husband had a job interview, and he came on me, was so excited. He said, "This is such a wonderful, conscious company. They're, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do this." And then they sent him the contract, and the contract didn't reflect any of the juicy stuff. It was just, sort of one boilerplate piece after another. And he said, this is not the conversation we had at all. Yeah, the lawyer wasn't in the room. The lawyer drafted something that wasn't anything about what they had talked about. And if we used a conscious contract, and in fact, my friend's wife is a lawyer, she went back and helped create a conscious contract in this case, where that conversation was captured, and it was like, these are the things we've talked about, and this is why we're doing this together. And we know that we're human beings. We're going to have conflict, and we're going to put that piece in as well. And so if the employee doesn't do something, if the employer doesn't do something, if the employer doesn't pay or whatever, this is how we're going to handle it. It's not a punishment model. It's more of we're partners in this venture together. I may be classified as an employer or an employee, but I need the employer needs the employee, and the like we each have something to give, and to move something forward together. So I can hear you're kind of like it is a paradigm shift of looking at it from that perspective of we're co-creating the world. And these are especially good in the gig economy, where people are not actually in employer roles. You might want to look at from the last call we had Archon mentioned, and there are a lot of videos out there about their employment contract that was actually a cartoon, a comic book contract, where they set out what are the vision and the values of this company, and then how do you fit into this company? How do you match in terms of what you're trying to create in the world? So those kinds of conversations are not common to sort of that traditional employment. It's like the employer has all the power and the employee just has to accept everything. It's a very different shift. I hope that answers.
Ma'am, I would like to know if we can extend this concept to e-contracts as well.
Say more. Say more about, like, you mean like terms of conditions? I don't know, when you say e-contracts, what
Yes.
specific? So
like drafting that.
So 99% of those things are never read. And so you can bring many of the principles. Now, the thing is that when you have a checkbox, you don't have a conversation. But you can bring many of the principles and actually say, this is who we are as a company. This is what we expect. And this is what you can expect from us. You can do them in cartoon form. You can make a nice terms and conditions that is still one-sided, but anticipates the other person. It's not conscious contracts because it hasn't been through the process, but it actually is. It is like an adaptation that's consistent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because every time you check yes in the box that yes, you're going to follow the Microsoft terms and conditions, you can't have a negotiation about that. But they could write them in a way you could understand them and actually freely choose to accept and not be afraid that something's hidden in there. There actually was a great story. I think the company was called Purple. It was like a company that provided internet services in restaurants and hotels and things. And their terms and conditions at one point said, you agree to clean the bathroom before you go. And you will pick up trash from the streets. And if anybody actually reads this and sees this, we will give you a reward. And so it actually went on for a long time. Like nobody read it. And so finally someone claimed the reward. And it was a big news article. You could probably find it on Google. That they were proving that people don't read, and that some other companies have done things like you forfeit your immortal soul, or you will provide your firstborn child. They put really crazy things in there as a clause just to see if people are reading, and they almost never do. There was a study of consumer law professors at a conference, and they did a little survey of whether they read contracts, and it was like terrible, like something like 78% of them didn't read contracts, even consumer law professors. And so it's one of the problems we're trying to overcome, because if you don't read the contract and you're bound by it, that just doesn't seem just.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Sure.
Keeping in mind that conscious contracts has not completely entered into the Indian market, or many of them are not completely aware of what it actually is. How do we, as law students, start implementing it from the ground level? Can you suggest one or two ways, or give me two examples where we can start about with it?
So the first thing I would recommend is to read Linda Alvarez's book, so that you can get a better sense of it, because this has been a really short introduction. And you can also get training so that you have a good command of the skills. And then one of the ways that this actually grows is that clients ask for it. And so we've had clients and very diverse clients. We've got some Silicon Valley startups that are now using this model for creating their foundation of trust from the beginning. We've had, like I mentioned, landlords. And my one client, once he discovered this, he had a lot of bad experiences with contracts, and once he discovered that he could actually be involved in the contracts process, he's using it for everything. And, the creation of his company now has a conscious contract, everything. And so once people know that this is possible, they often ask for it. So there are a lot of conscious capitalism companies in India. And I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of social entrepreneurs in India. And those people don't know this exists. And so if you start letting them know it exists, then they'll start asking for it. And if they ask for it, lawyers will provide it. Yeah. The issue is a quality issue of whether they're actually going to get sincerely trained, or if they're going to go through the motions. And so that's one of the reasons that I do training. It's because I want people to actually have that mindset shift. It's not just, we're going to have this conversation, check, and you just tick off the boxes and it's done, but nothing really changes. I don't want to encourage that. But when the paradigm shift has sincerely been made, I think that the demand comes, like my clients recommend their friends. I often get calls that say, your client referred me because we have a contract together, and I thought that it was like really a good contract, and he told me that I should call you and you should do all my contracts.
If anyone has any more questions.
It really, that's why I start with the paradigm shift. You really have to think out of the traditional paradigm, and you may need help in doing that, and there may, like, it's like, okay, well, how would this work with that? Like it's, that fixed mindset is what we are trained in, and as lawyers, it's either this or that and nothing in between. But that shift in mindset, and then to have these new tools, it's actually really exciting and fun. And I mean, to have a contract negotiation that's a game board, I mean, like, who would have imagined that 20 years ago? But it's really a great tool, and we can do them in workshop form. So I can train 20 companies at the same time. They each have their own game board, and I facilitate the conversation. And so it's more cost effective for the companies, and then they understand their contracts. It also, in South Africa, one of the things is that with the comic contracts, especially, is that there are a lot of different languages, and you can adapt to the actual language, not just the tone of the language, but the actual language itself.
I would like to take one question from the audience. Can you define ubi jus ibi remedium with respect to conscious contracts? That is actually where there is a right, there is a remedy.
I have no idea. What is that? It's not a term that I can define because I've never heard it.
Yes, ma'am. I think with this we can come to the end of the session, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to call on Rolene for giving a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The session was very interesting. We enjoyed a lot, and we came to know very new things today, like the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, the traditional one, and the one we can change the society with our own perspectives.
Oh, you figured that out. It's you can actually change society, and it's a tool for growth.
Like, we can try.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
We cannot change the whole like, India is a very dynamic country. We cannot change the whole, at once. But we can try doing that.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Law Essentials, Gurleen Kaur, thank you so much. I thank you. I extend my word of thanks. Thank you so much, ma'am. Over to you, Farhan.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude for all the support you have provided to us. With this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending it.
Thank you.